Welcome to the Spiritist Companion Podcast. My name is Yuri Castro, and I'll be your companion on this journey where we study, reflect, and put Spiritist teachings into practice. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and follow our weekly program released every Monday. Today's topic is filled with hope and deep meaning for all of us. The promised consoler, the promise of Jesus that continues to shine upon humanity. Shall we understand a little bit more? Well, first, let's talk about the promised consoler. What is it? In John chapter 14, Jesus tells his disciples, "If you love me, keep my commandments, and I will pray to the Father, and he will give you another consoler to be with you forever. The Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. But you know him, for he lives with you and will be in you." And later on he says, "I will not leave you orphans, I will come to you. But the Consoler, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and remind you of everything I have said to you." So this is interesting and a very rich passage, of course, because Jesus is already saying that we know him and that him, the Consoler, lives with us and will be in you. So that begs the question, do we have it in us? Do we have this knowledge already? Is it somehow perhaps written already in our conscience as we learn with Spiritism? Well, for us, as spirits, this promise is fulfilled in the third revelation, Spiritism. Not as a new religion that replaces Christ, absolutely not, but as a light that revives and clarifies what he, our dear Master, already taught us, but adding reasoned explanations and answers that humanity will need in its time of spiritual maturity. Jesus, knowing all that he knew, understanding everything that he understood, having all the virtues he had, he knew very well he could not have said everything to those people all those years ago, centuries, almost 2 millennia ago. In the same way that if we adults are teaching a child about, let's say, a mathematical concept, if they're very young still, we won't be able to teach them everything that we have already learned, because they would not be able to grasp the concepts. They would not be able to comprehend and understand. And Christ, in his deep knowledge of the human spirit and the moral condition of those at that time, knew that if he were to reveal everything, number one, we would not comprehend, we would not understand, much less apply. If we think about that, everything he already revealed, my dear friends, was taken in the wrong way for centuries and centuries. Imagine if he were to tell everything. Hence why he said that there would be a promised consoler, something else, a new set of knowledge that would come and help us understand a little bit more, help shed light. Therefore, the mission of the Consoler, we can think of it in three ways. One is to teach, so to reveal spiritual truths that were once hidden, that were once not revealed because of the reasons already mentioned. Number two would be to remind, so to restore the purity of Jesus' gospel, free from distortion, free from all the distortion we have already witnessed throughout centuries of misinterpretation and misapplication of Jesus' teachings. And number three, as the name says, to console. So the promised consoler, the third mission that we establish here, is to console. In other words, give meaning to our suffering, give us hope in the face of death, that is corporeal death, and certainty in divine justice, and certainty in a God that is infinitely good, fair, just, kind, and loving. In the book The Gospel According to Spiritism, this one on chapter 6, Kardec is going to write that all our sorrows, meaning the disappointments, the physical pains, the poverty perhaps, loss of loved ones, find their consolation in faith in the future and trust in the divine justice of God, which Jesus Christ came to teach us. So the consolation in faith in the future, meaning the consolation we can draw upon the knowledge of the immortal Spirit and in the justice of God. And these are two themes we already explored in this podcast. Divine justice, number 2, in episode 7 about death. So, if the Spirit of truth was to come later to teach all things, it is because Christ did not say everything. If the Spirit comes to remind us what Christ said, meaning the second thing that we establish, it is because his teachings have been forgotten or misunderstood, as they have. Spiritism, therefore, Kardec is going to say, that fulfills, as announced, the coming of the Spirit of truth. It calls humanity to live by God's law and teaches all things, helping us understand what Jesus once expressed through parables, or what he once, we can even add here, what he once expressed through stories or through simple phrases that carried a lot of deep meaning, but were unable to be comprehended back then, and I may add, even today. But why did we need the Consoler? Why do we need the Consoler still? Well, Jesus' message is eternal, but humanity in his time, especially back then, did not have yet the knowledge or moral readiness to grasp certain deeper truths. But as human understanding grew, as our intellectual development and even the moral development grew, there came the need for a complement, not to change the gospel necessarily, but to explain it in the light of reason and science, which are, as we say, the pillars of Spiritism, the 3 pillars. Science, religion, and philosophy. These 3 things that ground Spiritism and are indispensable, inseparable. The Consoler, therefore, bridges faith and reason, showing us that life continues after death, that we live many lives through reincarnation, also another episode here, and that all suffering has a purpose, meaning to educate, to transform us, because pain, the suffering, is not a result of God being unfair and having favorites. We learn that. So we are consoled in knowing that our pain is temporary. We are consoled in knowing that everything that we are suffering from, everything that we're having to withstand is very much fair and deserved. Didn't Jesus also say that in the Sermon on the Mount, in one of the Beatitudes? Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled or comforted, But how can we feel blessed if we don't understand why we suffer? If we're lacking the knowledge of the mechanisms of suffering and the reason for that, then we will not be consoled. But it's interesting that Jesus says that blessed are the afflicted, meaning those who suffer, those who carry afflictions, because they shall be consoled, or they will be consoled, depending on the translation. There is this notion of the future tense. They will be consoled, or they shall be consoled afterwards. So Spiritism helps us in seeing the causes of our trials, the causes of our atonements and expiation, which, in our past lives and in the earth's role as a place of learning and moral growth. So we have that understanding now with us. It shows us that suffering can be like a healing crisis of a way to purify the soul and prepare it for future happiness, a happiness that is still very far from us, but we will be achieving. In the book called The Consoler by the Spirit Emmanuel, psychographed by Chico Xavier, he's going to say that Spiritism is the consoler promised by Jesus, which comes to the world to restore the truth and teach that life is not just an episode between the cradle and the grave, but a centuries-long journey toward perfection. Because if that was all that it was, just from the cradle to the grave, a lot of the things that we have here would be simply unfair, unjust, and even unexplainable. The actual consoler would have nothing to console because everything only happens one time and that's it. But we know that the message is not necessarily a message of punishment, but of progress, not of condemnation, but of hope. And we can ask ourselves, how can we apply this in our lives? Well, when we lose someone we love, the pain is real and deep. But the consoler reminds us that no one truly loses who they love. It's just a temporary separation from the means that we're accustomed to, because we can still genuinely communicate with them. And we learn that life continues, that reunion is certain in the future as well. This knowledge turns despair into longing filled with hope. A message from the Spirit of Truth in the Gospel according to Spiritism says that God consoles the humble and gives strength to the afflicted when they ask. His might covers the earth, and in every place with each tear shed, He places a consoling remedy. Abnegation and resignation are continuous prayer and contain profound teaching. And we just talked about resignation on episode number 11 of this podcast, didn't we, my friends? As Kardec tells us in the Gospel according to Spiritism, in this manner, Spiritism realizes what Jesus said of the promised consoler by bringing knowledge of those things which allow man to know where he came from, where he is going, and why he is on earth, so attracting mankind towards the true principles of God's law and offering consolation through faith and hope. So no more blind faith, no more affliction without understanding why it's happening, how it's happening, and where we're going. The message is very much different now. And so I brought 3 different things that we can do in our lives to live this divine promise. Number 1, study. Yes, learn the spiritual laws so our faith rests on understanding. Spiritism is all about studying. It's not just listening to somebody that's speaking very well and just taking their word for it, just believing whatever they're saying. No, it's studying for yourself and study on your own so you can reach your conclusions. Number 2, I put live the gospel. Practice love, tolerance, and charity each day. So we can take that knowledge that we acquired through study and we can actually apply it in our lives. We can actually make our lives better. We can actually make other people's lives better, practicing the virtues of love, tolerance, charity, patience, benevolence, indulgence, and all those virtues that we learn about. And number 3, console. Much like the consoler, be an instrument of peace and comfort, just as we are comforted and consoled from above. Just as the spirits help us, just as the promised consoler came to open our eyes and make us see things differently now that we are capable of doing that, and we are consoled as a result. So let's do the same. Let's share this with others. Let's console others through our actions. My dear friends, the promised consoler is not just a doctrine. It is a living presence that continues to guide us. It reminds us that life is eternal, that love never dies, and that God's justice is perfect. As Jesus said, I will not leave you orphans. That's what our master, our dear master, friend, and older brother said. The consoler is with us and within us whenever we open ourselves to the light of the gospel. And just like that, we reached the end of episode 12 about the promised consoler, where we talked about how Spiritism can be this light that shines on dark places. Thank you for joining me once again, and if this message touched your heart, please share it with someone in need of hope and clarity. We'll be together again next Monday with another episode, and until then, hold fast to the light of the gospel and to the certainty that we never walk alone. With fraternal love, your Spiritist companion.